Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to my channel, and today in this video we are going to look at how I can create the functionality where I click on an individual link and then I'm redirected to the detail page of that link where I would like to see the recent failures that had happened for that particular link. So it's a very straightforward implementation, but we will touch upon a few important aspects. For example, we have already seen the backend code which was developed in my YouTube live session where I linked the URL with the URL failures, and I'm getting this data, and the idea is to show this on the detail page. So let's get started. So obviously the first thing that I will have to do is create a page. Let's just say inside the URL, I'll have a folder called view, and inside that I'll have id.tsx. Now the square bracket id means that on this particular page, I will get a query parameter, which is id. So let's quickly write some of the boilerplate code for every page that we are creating. All right, so we have this. Let me close everything else. We have this page which we are doing an export default. So now we will be able to go to that particular page. Let me come over here. So we have URLs /view/1, and yes, I'm able to get there, and the title is also visible. Fine. Now the next thing that I would like to do is obviously link this table so that I can click on an individual item and go there. So let me open up the link table, and I have this flex thing over here, right? So maybe I'll add one more div, a little bit of margin so that I have some gap, and then I'll have the link tag from nextjs. The href in this case will be /urls view url.id. Okay, this is where I need to take the user to, and the a tag will not have any href because that's converted from that's been taken from my link tag. However, I do need to add some classes, so I'll quickly do that. This is button square, but instead of secondary, let's add ascent. So I have this v button now. I can click on it and go to the detail, which is completely fine. And let's just quickly add a few failures. So this is my database. I can see URL ID 1 has 3, and URL ID 1 is basically, no, this is URL ID 1 doesn't exist. Right. So maybe what I will do is put all of them as 3 because we have ID 3. And then the idea is if I click on this particular thing, I should be able to fetch the data. So how do we do that? So on this page that we just created, right, the first thing that we need to do is obviously get the ID. So why don't we do something like router equals use router. We use this hook which is available from next, and I get the ID. Okay, and I'll also need the URL which I need to call, right, where we get the URL failure. So why don't we have a function called as fetch URL details. Await axios.get. Right now the URL is something like this. Let me get the template string, and then I'll do ID because that's what is going to change, right? This is an await, so async over here. Response is fine, and Now I need this URL somewhere in the state so that the rendering can happen accordingly. So constant. This is getting a little tricky because the URL and general URLs are quite similar. Okay, so the URL data will be initially null. I need to say what kind of data it is. So it's an IURL or null. This helps me in doing those checks. Okay, and obviously one thing which is missing I can now see is when I get the URL data, right, it needs to have the failure information, and if I go to IURL right now, it doesn't have the failure information. I haven't basically mapped that key into my URL model. So let us quickly do that. Failures, which is an optional thing, is an array of, let us say, interface I URL failure, which extends I model, because obviously there is that created at, updated at, and ID, right? So I URL failures is here. This L is hanging around. What happened? Right. I'll have to put this in a new file. Otherwise, it can get a bit complicated. URL failure dot interface.ts. Import that. And the only thing in here which I need to add is the URL ID, which I'm saying is going to be a number because the rest of the things are already present. But why is it still complaining? Failures implicitly has a type any, right? Because the semicolon is missing. My bad. Now, the IURL has the understanding of failures, right? Which is a model in itself. Now that we have that information in place, what is going to happen is the URL will also have an understanding that there are failure keys in it. So during the render, what I will be able to do is, let's just say, first of all, we create a small little card over here, something which I have been doing in this thing, right? So add form has this card kind of an effect. So why don't we first do that? I'll come over here. We are inside URL3, right? So div width half, shadow rounded, and let's just say padding is 10, bg should be white, and inside this what I will do is first I will check whether the URL is not null, and if that is the case, I'll do a react dot fragment. Okay, let's just say we will have an h2 says recent failures, and then we will have a ul, and in this ul we will have url.failures.map. I'll need to iterate, right? So I'll have fail and index maybe, and over here I'll return an li. The key needs to be present, so fail.id is something which I'll get. Okay, and I need to show the date, right? So if you see link table, I have this helper function. Where is it? Where is my helper function? Right, get local date, right? So I can use that. I'll say get local date function, and in there I'll do fail dot created at maybe. And then with this thing in place, ideally we should be receiving the data, but obviously I haven't set it, hence nothing is going to happen. So set URL, and then my structure is response dot data. I think it is data dot data. Right, this is the main key. So data dot data, and this needs to be called. So I'll do use effect and call this function. That's about it. So let's see recent failures. Nothing came in. That's bad. Let's see what's the network call looking like. It says undefined, which is a bummer. Why is this undefined? So failure URLs view ID. Okay, let me console this and see what is happening. I'm getting the ID. Okay, maybe it is coming as undefined at some point. So what I will do is ID not equal to undefined and end this. Okay, let me see the network call now. Oh yes, if it is ID, then the use effect should be on ID because it will continue to change. Now I made the API call. Data is here. Failures is an empty array. Why? This is interesting. So let me see. Oh, my bad. I understood the problem. So basically, what is happening is, see, I am connecting to my desktop URL, and I was looking at my laptop database, and I completely got confused with that. So in my desktop, all the failures are on link ID 1. So view 1, right, 11, 12, 13. Right, this is coming from a different URL, so it will never match. What I need to do is quickly maybe change the thing. I'll have to make this dynamic as well. This is something which is for now hard coded, right? These URLs doesn't make sense in this particular way. So, right. Now this is my desktop's view. This is the database which I have on my desktop, and in here ID1 gives me the recent failure. So that is what I wanted to get to. This is basically the listing of the recent failures. I need to add the breadcrumb as well. So let me quickly take this and I breadcrumb link, fine, URLs, which is fine. And then I have what? It can be URL failures. And then I'll have a template string URLs slash view, URL view, not failures, rather view. And I'll do this ID. Obviously, this is something which needs to come over here. Okay, and this breadcrumb, I can now send it to the layout. And I should see this. So this is good. Okay, I forgot this shouldn't have a link. Right. Rather, what if I delete this? It still gives me a link. I'll have to fix that, but at least now the breadcrumb says that we are in the URL view, and I can go to URL and click to see the details. So yeah, that's about it, guys. That's what I wanted to build. I will have more information about these URLs, some graphs and stuff like that. I'll be creating those functionalities pretty soon. But yeah, that's about it for today. If you like this video, do click on the thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.